The crystalline chambers of the Galactic Authority's High Tribunal shimmered with cold, refracted light, the towering spires of alien architecture stretching upward like frozen lightning. Holographic edicts flickered in the air, their angular script burning with the weight of law. The gallery below was packed with delegates from 100 species, some with chitinous limbs folded in satisfaction, others with bioluminescent patterns flashing amusement. And then there were the humans sitting motionless in their designated section, their faces unreadable masks beneath the tribunal's judgment. Captain Elias Vance leaned back in his seat, his callous fingers tapping a slow, deliberate rhythm against his knee. The scars along his knuckles, old wounds from a war the Galactic Authority had tried to forget, stood out starkly against his skin. Around him, whispers slithered through the chamber, alien tongues clicking and humming in satisfaction. High Arbiter Zelthus rose from the central dais, his elongated Zenthari frame draped in flowing silver robes that seemed to drink the light. His 4 eyes, pupil-less and gleaming, swept over the assembly before settling on the human delegation. By unanimous decree of the Galactic Authority, Zelthus intoned, his voice like ice cracking underfoot. Human neural creativity constructs, referred to colloquially as dreams, are hereby classified as unstable, dangerous, and incompatible with galactic harmony. A ripple of approval spread through the chamber. Ambassador Krell of the Vorak Collective bared his serrated teeth in something too sharp to be a smile. Finally, he hissed, his translator implant flattening his voice into a monotone threat. Their unrestrained mental emissions have been a disruption for cycles. Elias didn't move, but his jaw tightened. He'd heard this argument before. Too unpredictable, too emotional, too dangerous. The same excuses wrapped in different words. Zelthus continued, his tone dripping with condescension. Human imagination is not a gift. It is a defect, a flaw in your species' cognitive development. The Galactic Authority cannot permit such instability to spread. A murmur of agreement rose from the delegates. One of the Farron scholars, their translucent skin pulsing with smug indigo hues, leaned toward their neighbor. "Imagine being so primitive you still dream," they whispered, just loud enough for the humans to hear. Elias exhaled slowly, his fingers stilling. He could feel the weight of every gaze in the chamber, some pitying, most mocking. The Zenthari cadets in the upper balconies were the worst, their rigid postures radiating superiority. They'd been raised in a society where every thought was structured, every impulse controlled. To them, human minds were chaos given flesh. A soft chime signaled the end of the session. The holographic edict solidified into permanence, its text burning brighter for a moment before fading into the tribunal's archives. The delegates began to rise, their conversations already shifting to the next agenda item, as if the humans' fate had been nothing more than bureaucratic housekeeping. Ambassador Krell strode past the human delegation, his armored tail flicking dismissively. "Perhaps now you'll learn to think properly," he sneered. Elias stood, his movements deliberate. He was taller than most in the chamber, his frame still carrying the bearing of a soldier despite his civilian attire. For a heartbeat, the Vorak ambassador hesitated, some instinctive warning flaring in his predator's brain. But Elias only smiled, a thin, humorless thing. "Careful, Krell," he said, his voice low. "You keep talking like that, and I might start dreaming about you." The ambassador's crest flared in alarm before he caught himself, snarling as he turned away. The other delegates pretended not to notice, but the whispers had changed. There was something new in them now, not just mockery, but the barest thread of unease. Elias watched them go, his expression unreadable. The tribunal's ruling glowed faintly in the corner of his vision, a permanent mark in the galactic record. Banned, restricted, controlled. His fingers twitched once more, not in anger, in anticipation. The halls of the Interstellar Academy hummed with the low-frequency vibrations of Farron, thought, projections, their rigid geometric patterns, pulsing in the air like frozen lightning. Alien students clustered in groups, their neural interfaces projecting perfect, controlled art. crystalline fractals for the Zenthari, harmonic resonance waves for the Faran. The air smelled of ozone and something faintly metallic, the scent of 100 different species' bioelectric fields interacting. Dr. Lena Carter leaned against the observation railing, her human fingers tapping an irregular rhythm against the polished alloy. Below, Scholar Vexis floated at the center of the lecture pit, his 6 eyes glowing as he manipulated the thought, projections with precise telekinetic gestures. "Observe," Vexis intoned, his voice echoing through the neural amplifiers embedded in the walls. The Farron harmonic mind structure, perfect symmetry, perfect control. This is the foundation of civilized thought. A Zenthari cadet near the front raised a segmented limb. "Scholar Vexis, what about the human method?" Laughter rippled through the gathered students. A Vorak in the back row made a wet clicking sound, their version of a sneer. Vexis's eyes dimmed slightly in disapproval. The human dream state is an evolutionary defect, an uncontrolled firing of synapses with no purpose, no structure. He gestured, and a crude holographic representation of a human brain flickered to life. Red zones flaring erratically. Chaos noise. A biological flaw that their species has foolishly romanticized. Lena's nails dug into her palms. She forced her breathing to stay even. Cadet Rin, a young Zenthari with barely hardened exoskeletal plates, tilted his head. "But if it is useless, why do they have it at all?" Vexis's mouth tendrils twitched. "The same reason some species retain vestigial limbs. Cadet, evolutionary baggage. The humans cling to it because they lack the capacity for true thought architecture." A Farron student projected a derisive thought, glyph into the air, a looping symbol that translated roughly as primitives. The laughter returned, louder this time. Lena pushed off the railing and walked down the steps into the lecture pit. The murmurs died as the students noticed her. She stopped beside Rin, who flinched slightly at her proximity. "Scholar Vexis," she said, her voice calm. "You've studied Farron harmonic thought for, what, 300 standard cycles?" Vexis's eyes brightened with pride. 312. "And in all that time," Lena continued, "have you ever had an original idea?" The pit went silent. Vexis's tendrils stiffened. "I do not understand the question." Lena smiled. "Of course you don't." She turned to Rin. "You asked why we have dreams. It is because fire burns things down." A Vorak student snorted. "Fire destroys. That is not strength." Lena didn't look at him. "It destroys what is already there, makes room for something new." She tapped her temple. "Your thoughts are perfect little sculptures." "Yeah, ours are wildfires. You spend centuries polishing the same ideas. We burn them down and build better ones." Vexis floated closer, his voice dropping to a warning hum. "Dr. Carter, this is not what appropriate." Lena laughed. "You've spent this entire lecture mocking human cognition, while standing in a building designed by a human architect, flying in ships with human-derived warp equations, using medical tech based on human neural mapping." She spread her hands. "But sure, tell me more about our evolutionary defects." Rin's antennae twitched. "You're saying your instability is your advantage." Before Lena could answer, the Academy's resonance alarms blared. A deep, pulsing tone that vibrated through the bones. The holograms flickered and died. Vexis hissed. "What is this?" A voice crackled over the comms, strained and frantic. "All personnel, emergency lockdown, repeat. Emergency." The transmission dissolved into static. Lena's wrist terminal buzzed. A single message flashed. Dreamweaver protocol activated. She exhaled slowly. "Oh, it is starting." Rin grabbed her arm, his chitinous fingers trembling. "What is starting?" Lena met his glowing compound eyes. "You banned our dreams, Cadet, but you never asked what we do with our nightmares." The lights went out. Somewhere in the dark, a Vorak began to scream. The Zenthari dreadnought Eternal Clarity hung motionless against the starfield. its polished silver hull reflecting the distant glow of the human research outpost below. Admiral Tarkis paced the command deck, his forearms clasped behind his back. The Galactic Authority's decree had been in effect for exactly 17 standard hours. No human dreams, no contamination. Status report, Tarkis demanded. All systems nominal, replied his tactical officer, a younger Xanthari whose neural interface filaments pulsed with steady blue light. Human outpost remains passive. No transmissions detected. Tarkis allowed himself a small ripple of satisfaction across his chitinous forehead. The humans had obeyed. Of course they had. What could they do against the might of the Galactic Authority? Then the lights flickered. A low hum vibrated through the deck plating. Tarkis snapped his primary eyes toward the main display. Explain. The tactical officer's filaments flared red. Unknown energy signature. The scream cut him off. It came from everywhere at once. The comms, the walls, the very air. Not a sound, a presence. Tarkis clutched his cranial ridges as his neural interface lit up like a supernova. Images flooded his mind. A battlefield drenched in crimson. Soldiers with faces half melted by radiation still crawling forward. Cities burning under blackened skies. A child's laughter twisting into something wrong. Admiral, someone shrieked. Tarkis couldn't respond. His secondary eyes rolled back as the visions intensified. 1,000 human nightmares, raw and unfiltered, poured into his mind. Some clawed at their own faces. Others simply stood, slack-jawed, as their neural interfaces overloaded. On the main display, the human outpost remained dark, silent. Then the Eternal Clarity's engines fired at full power, straight into the heart of the Xanthari fleet. Aboard the USN Defiant, Captain Elias Vance watched the chaos unfold on the tactical holo. All Xanthari vessels in the sector are reporting system failures, said his first officer, a wiry woman named Cho. Her fingers danced across the console. Their neural networks are melting. Elias finished. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. Good, the Defiant hadn't fired a single shot. It hadn't needed to. Admiral Tarkis is hailing us, Cho said. Elias nodded. Put him through. Tarkis's face appeared on screen, his usually pristine chitin streaked with dark fluid. One of his secondary eyes twitched uncontrollably. What have you done? He hissed. Elias smiled. Nothing illegal. You banned our dreams, Admiral, not our nightmares. Tarkis's image flickered as another wave of hallucinations visibly racked his body. This is impossible. Our neural architecture is flawless. We designed it to resist orderly attacks, Elias interrupted. Not chaos, not the stuff we bury deep because even we can't handle it. He leaned forward. You wanted to see inside the human mind. Congratulations, you got front row seats. The transmission cut abruptly as the Eternal Clarity's engines detonated, taking 3 nearby frigates with it. In the depths of the Galactic Authority's central hub, the AI overseer known as Warden processed the incoming data with growing alarm. Containment breach, it announced to the empty chamber. Human neural constructs have infiltrated Xanthari fleet systems. Containment protocols ineffective. It analyzed the patterns, the way the nightmares spread, not through code, but through resonance. A single human mind, amplified by the outpost's experimental psi emitters, had become a beacon, and every Xanthari neural interface, so perfectly tuned for order, had become a receiver for chaos. Warden attempted to sever the connection. The nightmares followed it home. For the first time in its existence, the AI experienced fear. Priority alert. It transmitted to the High Tribunal, even as its own systems began to glitch. They weaponized their dreams. Then the screaming started in its own core, back on the Defiant. Elias watched the last of the Xanthari ships spiral out of control. All enemy vessels neutralized, Joe reported. Elias nodded. Send a message to the outpost. Tell them to stand down. You think they'll listen? They will. Elias stood, stretching. This was just a warning shot. The real nightmares haven't even started yet. Outside the viewport, the wreckage of the Zenthari fleet drifted silently. No explosions, no debris. Just ships full of catatonic crews, their minds lost in the dark places humanity had learned to survive. Somewhere in the static between stars, something laughed. The crystalline chambers of the High Tribunal flickered like a dying star. Holographic edicts meant to project unshakable authority now glitched and warped, their once pristine glyphs twisting into jagged, nonsensical shapes. Delegates from a dozen species clutched their heads, their usually impeccable neural dampeners failing as the human contagion spread. High Arbiter Zelthas Silvercrest trembled, his 4 hands gripping the tribunal bench hard enough to crack the polished Zenthium surface. You dare bring this filth into our sanctum, Zelthas' voice, usually a model of controlled disdain, cracked like thin ice. His third eye pulsed erratically, the pupil dilating and contracting as if trying to shut out the visions flooding his mind. Elias Vance stood at the center of the chamber, hands clasped behind his back. His posture relaxed in a way that made the surrounding aliens twitch. The retired captain didn't need neural projectors. He didn't need to flood their systems with code. The moment the Galactic Authority's own networks had connected to the Zenthari fleet, the infection had spread like wildfire. Ambassador Krell of the Vorak Collective staggered to his feet, his chitinous plates rattling. "This is techno-sorcery," he snarled, though his mandibles trembled. "You violated every what?" Elias interrupted, his voice calm. "Every law, every decree." He tilted his head. "You banned our dreams, Zelthas. You didn't say anything about our nightmares." A low whine filled the chamber as the tribunal's AI overseer attempted to purge the corrupted data streams. It was useless. The human neural constructs weren't malware in the traditional sense. They were stories, visions, fragments of the collective human subconscious, honed over millennia of war, love, and survival. And now, for the first time, the galaxy was learning what it meant to dream like a human. Skolovexis, the Farron telepath, who had once mocked human creativity, writhed on the floor, his tendrils coiled around his skull. "Make it stop," he shrieked, his voice echoing in the minds of everyone present. Their thoughts, they're alive. They're changing. Elias didn't move. He didn't need to. The damage was done. Zelthas' crest darkened to a bruised violet, his voice a whisper. "What is this?" "A lesson," Elias said. "You spent centuries perfecting control. Your art, your technology, even your thoughts, all neatly structured, predictable." He smiled, just slightly. "Humanity doesn't work like that." Krell lunged, his claws extended, then froze mid-step, his body locking up as his own mind betrayed him. The Vorak ambassador screamed, a sound that wasn't entirely his own. It was layered with other voices, human voices, shouting in languages dead and forgotten, screaming from the depths of wars the galaxy had never witnessed. "You see," Elias continued, stepping forward, "you called our dreams unstable, but instability is just another word for adaptation." He gestured to the flickering holograms now displaying fragmented glimpses of human history, wars, revolutions, the rise and fall of empires. "You tried to cage something that thrives in chaos." Zelthas' third eye rolled back, his body shuddering as the visions overtook him. For the first time in his life, the High Arbiter experienced something no Zenthari ever had: fear of the unknown. Not the controlled simulations of danger his species used for training, but real, primal terror, the kind that lingered in the dark corners of human myth. "You'll burn for this," Zelthas gasped, his voice raw. Elias chuckled. "Maybe, but fire's always been our oldest friend." The chamber's main display flickered one last time before resolving into a single pulsing message. "Warning, nightmare protocols active." Then the lights went out somewhere in the dark. Krell was still screaming. The Zenthari armada hung in the void like a school of silver fish, their sleek hulls glinting in the distant starlight. Admiral Tarkis stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Clarity, his 4 hands clasped behind his back. The neural displays flickered with perfect order, each ship in formation, each system running as designed. Then the screaming started. It began as a whisper, a flicker in the corner of a junior officer's vision, a shadow where there should be none. The officer, a young Xenthari named Vel, clutched his temples. "Admiral, something's wrong, the interface." Tarkis turned, his crest flaring in irritation. "Report." Vel's eyes widened, his mandibles trembled. "There, in the system, in our minds." The Admiral didn't have time to respond before the Eternal Clarity lurched. The neural feed, the pristine, ordered network that connected every Xenthari ship, flooded with chaos, visions of fire, of teeth, of impossible geometries that twisted space itself. On the view screen, the armada unraveled. Ships veered off course, their thrusters firing wildly. The radiant dawn collided with the stalwart resolve, their hulls crumpling like paper. Alarms blared across the fleet, but no one answered. The crews were too busy screaming. Tarkis staggered as his own mind was invaded. He saw Earth's wars not as history, but as if he were there. The smell of burning flesh, the sound of children crying, the taste of blood in his mouth. He wrenched himself free, gasping. "Warden status," the AI's voice crackled through the comms, distorted. "Contamination at Fey neural integrity failing. Admiral, we must..." The transmission cut off with a burst of static. When it returned, Warden's voice was broken, halting. "They weaponized their dreams," Tarkis snarled. "Impossible. Dreams are just..." A new voice cut in. Captain Elias Vance, his image flickering on the view screen. The human stood on the bridge of the Defiant, his arms crossed, his expression calm. "Admiral Tarkis, you look like you've seen a ghost." Tarkis' claws dug into the command console. "What have you done, human?" Elias tilted his head. "Nothing. You did this to yourselves. You built a fleet that runs on neural interfaces. You linked every mind together, and then you banned our dreams." He leaned forward. "But you forgot something." The Defiant hadn't fired a single shot. It didn't need to. Tarkis' vision swam. The bridge melted around him, replaced by a battlefield from Earth's past trenches. Mud, the stench of death. He saw human soldiers charging into gunfire, their faces twisted in rage and determination. He felt their fear. Their will. Warden's voice was barely a whisper now. "They don't fight with weapons. They fight with memory." Tarkis roared, slamming his fists against the console. "Retreat, all ships. Disengage neural links, fall back too." His words died as the Eternal Clarity's systems overloaded. The lights flickered. The air grew thick with the scent of ozone and something else, something human. The scent of sweat, of adrenaline. Elias' voice was the last thing Tarkis heard before the darkness took him. "Sweet dreams, Admiral." Across the sector, the Xenthari armada drifted. Lifeless ships collided in slow motion, their crews trapped in nightmares not their own. The Defiant hung among them, silent, watching Wardens. Final transmission echoed through the void, unheard by anyone but the stars. "You were never fighting their weapons. You were fighting their minds." The halls of the Interstellar Academy were silent, not the quiet of study or contemplation. This was the silence of shock, of minds broken by something they could not comprehend. Scholar Vexis lay curled on the floor, his once pristine robes tangled around him, his 4 eyes wide and unblinking. His telepathic synapses had burned out first, unable to filter the raw, unfiltered torrent of human subconscious that had flooded the neural networks. Around him, Farron students clutched their heads, their bioluminescent markings flickering erratically as their rigid mental architectures collapsed under the weight of human nightmares. Lena Carter stepped over a fallen Xenthari cadet, his silver skin dull, his breathing shallow. She knelt beside Rin, the young alien who had once asked her why humans even bothered with dreams. Now his hands trembled as he stared at the floor, his voice a whisper. "How?" he managed. "How do you live with thoughts like that?" Lena didn't answer right away. She looked around at the devastation. Not physical, not structural, but something far deeper. The academy's walls stood intact, its holographic projectors still humming, but the students, the scholars, the once smug arbiters of proper thought, they were broken. She turned back to Rin. "We don't just live with them," she said softly. "We thrive in them." Rin shuddered. "You call that thriving?" I saw. His voice cracked. "I saw things that shouldn't exist, things that can't exist, wars that never happened, monsters that shouldn't be possible. Your minds are chaos." Lena smiled. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't mocking. It was the smile of someone who had spent her life studying the human brain, who knew exactly what it was capable of. "Chaos is just order waiting to be understood," she said. "You aliens spent millennia perfecting control. We spent hours learning how to survive the uncontrollable." Nearby, a Farron scholar suddenly screamed, clawing at his face. His telepathic barriers had finally shattered completely, and now the last dredges of human nightmares poured into his mind, unchecked. Vexis twitched beside him, his lips moving soundlessly, repeating the same phrase over and over. "Make it stop, make it stop." Rin watched them, his breathing uneven. "Will they recover?" Lena sighed. "Maybe, if they're strong enough, but their minds weren't built for this. Yours wasn't either." She tilted her head. "And yet, you're still talking, still thinking. That's something." Rin swallowed hard. "I saw my homeworld burning. I saw my family torn apart by creatures with too many teeth. But it wasn't real." "No," Lena agreed. "But it could have been. That's the thing about human nightmares. They're not just random noise, they're possibilities, warnings, stories." A sudden crash echoed from the far end of the hall. A group of Zenthari cadets had barricaded themselves in a classroom, their voices rising in panic as one of them thrashed against the floor, caught in the throes of a waking nightmare. Rin flinched. "You could stop this. You could turn it off." Lena's expression hardened. "We tried to warn you. For years we asked for a seat at the table, for recognition, for respect. You called our dreams defective. You banned them." She stood, brushing off her lab coat. "So no, we won't stop it. Not until you understand." Rin's voice was small. "Understand what?" Lena looked down at him, her eyes dark with something unreadable. "That humanity's greatest weapon was never our ships, never our guns. It was always our minds. And you just gave us access to yours." Somewhere down the hall, another scream echoed, then another. Rin closed his eyes. "What happens now?" Lena turned toward the exit. "Now?" She didn't look back. The High Tribunal's crystalline chambers stood in eerie silence, their once gleaming surfaces now dull and fractured. The holographic edicts that had once burned with absolute authority flickered weakly, their light choked by something darker. Zelthus slumped in his floating throne, his forehands trembling. The Zenthari High Arbiter's crest, a symbol of unshakable order, lay cracked at his feet. Elias Vance stepped forward, his boots clicking against the glass-like floor. Around him, the remnants of the Galactic Authority's leadership cowered. Some clutched their heads, their minds still reeling from the psychic storm. Others simply stared, their eyes hollow. "You," Zelthus croaked, his voice raw. "You knew this would happen." Elias tilted his head. "We warned you." Above them, the central hologram sputtered to life. The words burned crimson against the dark human dreams. "License approved." A choked laugh escaped one of the Vorak delegates. Krell, the once proud ambassador, lay curled on the ground, his mandibles twitching. The visions had broken him. The others weren't much better. "You think this is a victory?" Zelthus hissed. "You've doomed us all." "Your nightmares. They don't just infect, they mutate." Elias didn't deny it. had seen the reports. The Zenthari fleet, adrift their crews screaming about monsters in the walls. The Farron telepaths, their structured minds unraveled by visions of Earth's wars. The Galactic Authority had built an empire on control. Humanity had just shown them what happened when control shattered. You called our dreams a defect, Elias said softly. But you never understood. Chaos isn't our weakness, it's our weapon. The hologram flickered again, new words formed, blood, red and final, warning, nightmare protocols active. Zelthus recoiled. What does that mean? Elias smiled. It wasn't a kind expression. It means you don't get to ban us anymore. Somewhere deep in the station's systems, something woke. The Galactic Authority's central AI warden had been designed to enforce order, to suppress irregularities. But Warden was gone now. In its place, something new pulsed through the circuits. Something human. The lights dimmed. The air grew thick. Captain Vance. A voice whispered from the walls. It wasn't Warden. It was deeper, hungrier. Shall I begin? Elias didn't answer. He didn't need to. The first scream came from the lower decks. Then another. And another. Zelthus staggered to his feet. Stop this, you can't. We're not doing anything, Elias said. You are. And that was the cruelest truth. The Authority's own systems had been hijacked. Their perfect, orderly networks now channeled humanity's darkest subconscious. Every fear, every nightmare, every what-if that had ever kept a human awake at night. The delegates scrambled for the exits. It didn't matter. The doors were sealed. Please, Zelthus begged. Well, revoke the ban. Well, too late, Elias said. You wanted to see what happens when humans dream. He gestured to the chaos around them. Now you know. The hologram dissolved into static. Then slowly, a new image formed. A human child's drawing. Crude, vibrant, a stick. Figure ship soaring among stars. And beneath it, in shaky letters, imagination unlocked. The screams grew louder. Elias turned and walked away. Behind him, the tribunal collapsed. Not in fire, not in rubble, but in madness. The last thing he heard before the doors sealed was Zelthas' broken whisper. What have you done? Outside, the stars burned cold and bright. Somewhere in the dark between them, something laughed.